Minister, you said in your speech that diversity of content and diversity of ownership across the media remains an important part of a healthy democratic society, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. What you said, we are retaining the basic model of current laws based on the principle of avoiding intervention by government in media ownership, except in specific circumstances following procedures determined by law. Now, I would like to see the government not take such a hands-off approach, and I would like to see a lot more regulation of what exactly happens. Right now, the situation of the media in Ireland, as far as I'm concerned, is in peril. The fact that the ownership of the Irish media is increasingly entering the hands of an elite few spells disaster for the possibility of engendering a vibrant and participatory democracy in this country. But the media and how it is structured does not appear out of nowhere. To quote the media historian Robert McChesney, he said, "The policies, structures, subsidies and institutions that are created to control, direct and regulate the media will be responsible for the logic and nature of the media system." This means that the problem of the media is a political one, and a serious discussion about media monopolisation and the importance of a well-funded, objective and independent media needs to take place in this House. There is unquestionably a direct link between the control of the media and control over society, especially in a democratic society where issues are up for debate and an informed citizenry means a healthier democracy. It is interesting then to consider what kind of information the mainstream Irish media disseminates to the Irish public. Last year, Julian Mersel of UCD published a revealing study that examined how the Irish Times, Irish Independent and Sun Independent reported financial consolidation and general budget issues from the period of January 2008 to December 12. The results are startling. To quote from Mersel's research, "Significant support for fiscal consolidation, which we must remember is a core aspect of the austerity programme, is clear," he says. In total, there are 431 articles. 55% are in favour of fiscal consolidation, 12% against it, and 34% neutral. When neutral pieces are excluded, 83% of articles support fiscal consolidation and 17% oppose it. No time pattern could be detected in the evolution of views on fiscal consolidation, apart from the fact that a larger number of articles appeared towards the end of years, in the months of November and December, which is explained by the fact that this is the time at which the budget is discussed. Out of the 431 articles, 75 are written by outside writers, in other words, not journalists. Of these, 47% are economists or working in the financial sector, 17% are high political officials, 8% are academics, excluding the economic academics, but only 5 making up 7% are from trade unions and 7 from progressive organisations. Only a minority of pieces explicitly oppose consolidation itself by calling for a fundamentally different strategy, such as Keynesian economic stimulus. This can be seen in the fact that among all articles, 8% oppose cuts and only 3% stated a preference for increased government spending. If only the 50 articles opposed to fiscal consolidation are considered, a similar pattern is found. 54% of them disagree with specific expenditure cuts, while 20% suggest that public spending should be increased. The nature of the opposition to fiscal consolidation is therefore based mostly on disagreement with particular cuts rather than with the principle of consolidation. This suggests that the public debate in the media is framed around the ways in which fiscal consolidation can best be implemented, as opposed to comparing and contrasting it with other strategies. Nevertheless, on economic policy, the independent newspapers are ideologically to the right of the Irish Times, and this explains why more opposition to conservative economic policy is likely to appear in the latter rather than in the former. This can be traced in part to the fact that the Irish Times is governed by a trust that ensures some level of independence from commercial interests. For example, it does not have beneficial shareholders and cannot pay dividends. Now, a number of its board directors also come from elite institutions, and the Times, like other papers, is dependent on advertising revenues and sales, and this does veer it to the right. Now, we must not forget that the media is part and parcel of the political and corporate establishment, and Dr. Mercer has also written a paper on the role of the media in sustaining Ireland's housing bubble, where he found that news organisations largely sustained the bubble until the property market collapsed. He writes, "News content reflects economic and political elites' interests and views. The Irish media can be seen as neoliberalism in line with Ireland's political economy. Over the last several decades, mergers have reduced the number of smaller, independent regional news organisations and increased the concentration of ownership. Both private and state-owned Irish media largely convey established views." Now, the control of Dennis O'Brien has over the media does beggar belief. He holds a 29.9% stake in independent news and media, which accounts for 40% of all newspaper sales in Ireland. Now, the said gentleman also controls 6 radio stations, including News Talk and Today FM. He controls the Herald, Irish Independent, Sunday Independent, Sunday World, and co-owns the Irish Star, and 14 regional newspapers, including the Wexford People, Newra Standard, Enniscorthy Echo and Guardian, Gorey Guardian, and 2 free newspapers. Now, his ability to shape the news in Ireland is massive if he controls 40% of it. How, in God's name, can that be healthy for democracy? I had the audacity in here last week to criticise some aspects of how independent news and media operate. I highlighted the fact that they had got a 138 million bailout from the banks, at which almost 60 million of it fell on the Irish taxpayer. You know, when I was actually walking out of the chamber, a deputy said to me, he says, "Are you mad?" he says, "criticising the Independent. They'll get you," he says. Well, anyone that was dull enough to buy the Star yesterday, now my life is a bit short to be reading such rag mags, but anyone that did would discover that, yeah, they made an effort at getting me, and they highlighted the fact that I was going to cost the state money. They didn't highlight the fact that I had planned permission for 28 sites, 28 own-door units on that site. They've been sold for less than 20,000 each. If the bank had worked with me, it wouldn't have cost them a fraction of what it's going to cost them now. And there's no logic to what's happened. The same as there's been no logic to banks selling both some of my apartments in the 20s, over 20 at a time, and going to investors for less than half what I could build them for tomorrow, less than half to what the public can buy them off, can buy them for, if they were buying them individually. And this has a lot to do with the rising rent in Dublin now today, as I stressed this morning with the Minister at question time. But more and more of the apartments and houses for rent in Dublin are in the control of fewer and fewer people, because the investors and speculators have bought up at seriously reduced rates huge numbers of these. Now, you pay a price by daring to challenge these people. Now, I mean, if only, I mean, just give you an example, right? Minister, and it's in your area as well, the TTIP, right? I mean, George Monbiot wrote an article about the TTIP in the Guardian in England, right? A paper that we could only aspire to hear. And he says the US trade deal is a full frontal assault on democracy. He says the purpose of the transatlantic trade and investment partnership is to remove the regulatory differences between the US and European nations. The ability it will grant big business to sue governments which try to defend their citizens and is frightening, he says, and it would allow a secretive panel of corporate lawyers to overrule the will of Parliament and destroy our legal protections. Yet the defenders of our sovereignty say nothing. I find it incredible how little coverage there has been of the TTIP in the Irish mainstream media. Irrespective, Minister, of what position you or I take, I find it frightening that it's not even being discussed one way or the other. And that's really disappointing.